everybody. I had about 50 introductions ready, and I don't know what's going to come out right now. I'm going to try to be brief so we can get to Charles. I'm always asking these questions. What the heck is going on? Why are these things happening? How come we're not living in a more beautiful world? Why aren't we being nice to each other? And I read a lot. So I found this book called The Ascent of Humanity. And it seemed to have some plausible explanations of where we are now and where we're headed. That's with a positive ending. So without further ado, I bring you Charles Eisenstein.
Well, thank you for welcoming me to your beautiful church here. I've been waiting for the sermon to happen, and then it hasn't happened yet, and I realized maybe that's my job. Yeah, you know, the painting on the cover of this book it's a 16th century painting by Peter Bruegel the Elder, some Dutch dude, and they're trying to build a tower to the sky there, all the way to heaven, and you know. You look at the painting and you realize that their project is doomed, you know, and you can imagine them standing around thinking like, you know, are we there yet? You know, we don't seem to be much closer to the sky, despite all of our hard efforts to get there. So what are we going to do about that? The fact that we've made no progress toward heaven, despite trying so hard. Let's build it a little higher. Let's try even harder. And I think the story is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for humanity in general and our project to create this utopia on Earth through technology, for example. The idea that you know, this perfect world, this amazing world of leisure and ease and happiness and joy is going to come just with a few more little inventions. You know, maybe. I mean, this has been with us since the age of coal, you know, the age of the machine, when science fiction writers or visionaries in the 18th century were saying, you know, these machines, they do the work of 1,000 men. So very soon, each man will only have to work 1,000th as hard. And actually, people ended up working even harder. And why didn't it work? Well, it's because we hadn't invented electricity yet. But it was the age of electricity, the electrified era, that would finally usher in technological utopia. And then after that, it was atomic power, you know, the computer, biotechnology, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, you know, and medical breakthroughs. And there's kind of this idea that if we build high enough, and social engineering too, better laws, you know, better education, better schools, you know, we're gonna build a tower to heaven. And today, just like in the painting, you guys can get a closer look later, but the effort to build it higher and higher is faltering. And the lower stories are starting to crumble, you know, and it takes us just as much effort to repair, to even keep it at the current height. And we don't have the means anymore to build higher and higher. And so we see this happening as you know, lifespans aren't increasing fast anymore. In fact, they're stagnant. And our problems aren't being conquered one by one. New problems are arising everywhere. And just like in the story, the time is coming when we're starting to abandon our effort to build a tower to heaven. And when we do that, you know, we look around and we notice that, you know, where does the sky begin anyway? It begins an inch off the ground. It's already here. It's just a shift of perception away. And we've been like the man who's trying to run to the horizon, you know, and he runs, and the horizon's still the same distance away, so he thinks, well, I've just got to run faster. So a project centuries or even millennia long is coming to an end in our time. And there's a personal level to this as well. It's the idea that if only I make enough improvements on myself, if only I work hard enough on myself, if only I discipline myself enough, then I will achieve paradise. I will achieve heaven. And for different people, it's a different thing. Like for some people, it's the diet. You know, if I could only try harder, I'm going to have to exercise more, I'm going to have to do workouts, I'm going to have to eat less, and it's going to be this monumental effort of will. And if I do it enough, then I will reach the paradise of thinness. And well, what happens when it doesn't work? It's just like running to the horizon. You know, that diet didn't work, I'm back to my old weight, I'm just going to have to run faster, I'm going to have to try harder next time. So it's this effort of self-improvement, this idea that heaven or enlightenment is something that takes great striving and building and willpower. And it could also be the effort to raise your vibration, to conquer your ego, to become more conscious, to become more mindful. And all of these things involve a struggle against yourself, a struggle against desire. And it's only when we give up that we realize that it's all available right now, you know, that the sky begins an inch off the ground, that it's around us today. And this is the other shift that's happening in our time. Certainly, you know, mystics have realized this for a long time and have tried to teach us this truth. But today we're living in the time where lots and lots of people are realizing it all at once. So there's an internal and an external aspect to the changes that are happening in our time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both. I originally was just going to talk about the first, but then I realized that this is a church and stuff, so it's good to talk about both. So the first, there's the two things that are ending, I call them the story of ascent and the story of separation. The story of ascent says that humans were once just lowly animals. We had no real understanding of the world, so we made myths and superstitions. We had no real control over the world like we do with technology today, so we had rituals, you know, and magic, which doesn't actually work. You know, we naively made cave paintings, you know, hoping that would attract animals to the hunt. And the story goes, now we've ascended beyond that. We have technology that we can control nature and transcend nature, and we have science that you know allows us to understand nature for real. And someday, the story goes, this ascent will be complete. We will become the masters, the lords and masters of nature, as Descartes said. We will figure out the theory of everything in physics, and we'll be able to calculate any phenomenon and therefore control everything too, because we'll have perfect understanding, therefore we'll have perfect control. We'll be able to conquer all disease, we'll be able to conquer death, we'll be able to upload our consciousness into computers. The religious or the spiritual corollary of this, or the philosophical corollary of this ascent above nature, is that the ascended person, the developed person, is somebody who's not really so involved with nature. You know, the higher person, and think about this word higher. Like, what's so good about higher? Anyway, like, where did that begin? What's wrong with low? You know, what's wrong with low vibrations? Don't you like bassoons? You know, bass violins, those have low vibrations, and you know, should we always be listening to flutes and piccolos? You know, like, where did that come from? You know, it came from agriculture, when the first hierarchies, the first human hierarchies developed, and the people at the bottom of the hierarchy were the farmers, the peasants, you know, the slaves who got dirty, and the people at the top of the hierarchy were the priests and the king. who was originally the top priest, and his feet were not allowed to sully themselves with soil. They weren't allowed to suffer the pollution of the earth. He was rising above. And at the same time, the gods, who had originally been identified with forces of nature and were part of nature, the gods left. They left. They went up into the sky. And so even if you're not a religious person, this mindset still exists that the developed person, the higher person, is the one who is not so involved with materiality. The material is supposed to be low, right? Materiality, that's bad. And what's good? Mind, consciousness, spirit, these higher things are supposed to be good. So it's this mindset is very deep within us. And on a personal level, it ends up as a war against the self. Because there's this low part, this part of desire and pleasure and indulgence, and emotions and stuff. And then there's this higher part, the soul or the spirit or the mind, the consciousness, that exists in a pure realm. And why is pure good? Well, pure means not dirty, not polluted, not mixed up with lots of other things. So it's almost hard to even speak about these things without undermining my point. Because most of the words that we use as a synonym for good have something to do with higher, purer, abstract, superior. That means above, too. What's wrong with below? Inferior. So this mindset infiltrates some of our basic beliefs. And it starts a war against the self. When you fight a war against the self, you're destined to lose, even when you win. The external dimension of the war against the self is the war against nature, which we've prosecuted with increasing intensity for thousands of years. Both of these wars are coming to an end. This is what I would call reunion. The war against nature is coming to an end. It wasn't that long ago that people envisioned the future as a future without nature. You've seen the Jetsons, right? There's not a single living thing in the Jetsons besides people. There's no plants, The houses rise above the clouds, above nature, and actually, if you really notice, there's like a thick layer of pollution, actually, underneath all of their bubble houses, way up above the clouds. Even the dog is a robot. And people, in the 1950s and 60s, the vision of agriculture was hydroponics. These plants growing in glass, sterile environments, pollinated with machines. And people said, thanks to the wonder chemicals, thanks to DDT, thanks to all of these inventions of the scientists, we will overcome nature. There will be no more insects. No more insects. We won't need them anymore. There will be no more disease, no more germs. And we can see that today, we don't believe that anymore, and we can see the results. We can see the results of the war against nature. The results are that we suffer too. The war against disease has not done so well, has it? For a while, it looked like we were going to wipe out disease because all of the big killers of the 19th century and before had been overcome. But then all kinds of new diseases appeared out of nowhere. The autoimmune diseases, for example. Cancer, which was once very rare. Heart attacks were once very rare, too. So the war against the self, the war against nature, it's becoming more and more obvious that it's not working. The great engineering projects that are meant to dominate nature, to take from nature, to take the oil from deeper and deeper underground, the minerals, to the giant bulldozers that can cut down forests more efficiently. We're starting to see the effects of this. The effects are starting to come back. And so this story of ascent is coming to an end because we're realizing the truth that the mystics have taught us for thousands of years. We're realizing that what we do to nature, we're doing to ourselves. When nature gets sick, we get sick. Jesus said it the way it's quoted is, do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself. But I think that actually what he said was, as you do unto others, so you are in fact doing unto yourself. Because he understood this principle, that this is the other story, the story of separation. What is a self? Well, here's one, and there's another, and we're separate. And so if I do something to you, who cares? As long as I take some precautions, if I steal your wallet, I make sure not to get caught, But who cares, Really, who cares what happens to anybody else? Who cares about the oil spill? Really? I'll just move somewhere else. I just won't eat shrimp anymore. Maybe I have enough money to buy shrimp from somewhere else. Who cares? Really, what does it matter for me? Practically speaking, it doesn't. But the problem is that that's not the truth. The truth is that anything that happens to any being anywhere, including the being of the ocean, the being of the planet, is also happening to me. How do I know this? I can feel it. When you read about or see the pictures of tar balls, and oil slicks, and mountaintops being removed to get the coal, you feel a loss. You feel a hurt. You feel a wound. The reason you feel that is because you are being wounded, because that being that's being hurt, that's not separate from you. That's a part of yourself. So of course it hurts. And that's what Jesus was saying. He wasn't giving you a rule, and you obey this rule if you want to be good and go to heaven. He was speaking from compassion. He's like, it'd be like you saw someone, if you see somebody punching themselves, hurting themselves, and you're like, don't do that. That's the mentality he was speaking from. And the quote that we had today, too, the two injunctions, love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Not a rule. Not a rule. What he was saying is, as you love your neighbor, so you, in fact, are loving yourself. That's what we're waking up to today. It makes it a lot easier for me to, people think that, we're still getting used to this idea. People will take steps to live in a way that doesn't harm the earth. They'll, recycle things. They'll maybe try to vote for candidates who support environmental protection, which are actually very rare. They will try to use less, to be less wasteful, to turn down the thermostat and stuff. And these actions are all very irrational from the point of view of the separate self. The way that okay, so many ways I could take this. Suppose you have a little kid and you believe in the separate self, because because that's what we're taught. We're taught it in biology, that we're programmed by our genes to maximize rational self-interest, or reproductive self-interest. And that's how biologists explain the behavior, at least up until very recently. That's how they explain the behavior of animals and plants. This behavior helps them compete. It helps them have more resources. It helps them survive and reproduce, maybe at the expense of other beings. And this is biologically programmed. And economics says the same thing. Economics says that we seek our rational self-interest to you go to the store and there's two identical items and one's cheaper. Which one do you buy? You buy the cheaper one because you're maximizing your self-interest, which is defined in terms of money. We're taught that. And we're taught by science that we live in an objective universe where I'm here and you're there and this thing is outside of me. And so if I take this, that's more for me and that's less for you. So your child then, suppose you want your child to not act like that. Suppose you believe this worldview. Basically, this worldview says what? It says you're bad. You are fundamentally bad. Your biological nature is bad. Your economic nature is bad, selfish, greedy. And you believe this. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You don't want your children to be bad. You don't want yourself to be bad. So what do? I mean, this belief system is imbued into every religious institution also. John Calvin spoke of the total depravity of man. Going back even farther, we have original sin. You're born bad. So what are you going to do about it? Well, what you can do about it is you can try to turn self-interest against itself. So you can try to punish your child for being selfish, and therefore make it in his best interest to actually share. Because what will happen if he doesn't share is you're going to, reject him somehow. Really, I mean, physical punishment isn't the greatest fear of a child. The greatest fear of a child is rejection, abandonment. Any mammal. That's true of any mammal. That's why a baby mammal will cry piteously for its mother if it's abandoned, even though that will attract predators. Because, that's not maybe the mother will come, but if the mother doesn't come, if the baby's lost, then it has no milk. And so baby mammals, little mammals, including children, want more than anything else to be accepted by the mother. And so therefore, if you want to control a child, you use conditional praise and conditional rejection. What's wrong with you? Shame on you, or good boy, And this taps into this survival, which it's a very powerful weapon. And we can use that weapon to overcome other natural desires. And this is all based on the assumption that you're bad. And so then we grow up and we internalize this voice and apply it to ourselves, and we try really hard to be good. You can see it again in dieters. I was good today. And then, or any way that you're trying to improve yourself. Could be, that you want to stop yelling at your kids. It could be that you want to just stop thinking judgmental thoughts. We heard the reading today, about discernment and judgmentality, and you hear that and you're like, oh man, I'm being judgmental. And how do you then conquer that? Well, it's the same mechanism that we use on children. It's like, what's wrong with me? I'm bad for doing that, and I want to love myself, and so if I stop doing that, then I get to approve of myself, and then I get to count myself as good. So this war against the self is everywhere. And I guess really what I'm here for is to proclaim the end of it. And lots of people are proclaiming the end of it, and we're hearing all of these teachings about self-acceptance and self-love, and it goes along with our natural desire too, and our understanding that, in fact, more for you is more for me, and that what happens to any being is in fact happening to ourself. And so we're waking up from this delusion, the delusion that the universe is divided into two parts, the good part and the bad part, good and evil, spirit and matter, body and soul, and that goodness comes through fighting the bad part, conquering the bad part, conquering the weeds, conquering the wolves, conquering the wind, conquering the natural forces, ascending to a human realm, the realm of spirit and consciousness. That's all coming to an end. And internally what's coming to an end is the fight against evil, the fight against greed, the fight against selfishness, the fight against sin. Those are the old terms for it. The fight against ego, the fight against fear. Those are the new terms, the fight against judgmentality. You know, this endless campaign to pull out all the weeds, to kill all the insects, and to have this perfect controlled environment. But really, what are you reinforcing then? It's just fighting. It's hate directed inside. And then we think that we can be non-judgmental towards other people, but still judgmental towards ourselves. But that never works. So we're hearing the teachings all over the place about self-acceptance. And sometimes we apply the same thing to self-acceptance. And what's wrong with me for not accepting myself? And what's wrong with me for being judgmental towards myself? And I've got to stop doing that so I can then approve of myself. So if you notice, you know, during that reading, if you noticed any twinge of shame for being judgmental or any self-congratulation for not being judgmental, both those are signs that you're being judgmental. The shame or the congratulation. And are you feeling ashamed now that you were ashamed or congratulatory? Or are you congratulating yourself for not doing that? Okay, it's very sneaky. So what is the proper approach then, if you notice yourself being judgmental? It's to say, yep, I'm being judgmental. Yep, there it is. And the witnessing of it is enough. Because the witnessing of it, the witnessing is what allows truth to emerge. And that's all you have to do. Do we do questions and stuff, or do I just stand here? Yeah.
Okay, you were talking about the ascension. So
Yeah.
now is it kind of like the ascension when you get back in touch with the low parts and vibrations and you're coming down to?
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool way to look at it. Like to say, yeah, it's time to descend again. It's time to love Earth, love matter more. You know, I mean, people think that the problem is materialism. I think the problem is not enough materialism. I think if we really loved matter, if we really loved materials, you know, if we said, I'm going to honor every single thing that I take from the earth and make art out of it, like make something beautiful out of it, you know, treat it with respect, honor where it came from, honor the tree that I cut down. Like Native Americans, they wouldn't just, you know, just chop down a tree and make a canoe. You know, they would only do that they would do rituals around that. You know, that was a big deal to do that because they loved matter more. So yeah, it's kind of a descent and it's a reunion. It's an integration of and an acceptance of all the vibrations, not just the high ones. Yeah. Yep.
Just wanted to, while you were talking, something came to me that when I was naming my son, I talked with a friend about the vibrations and, you know, anyone who's familiar with numerology and 11 and 22 being master numbers and what each number represents on a chakra and just on a vibratory level. And I kept coming back to one with his name, and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. That's like the lowest vibration. And just intuitively, even though I had input from a lot of loving, welcoming friends, I said, no, I just am going with the one vibration. It just feels right to me, and it signifies new beginnings. And that
Yeah. What did you name him eventually?
Benny Usai.
Yeah. I certainly became a lot happier when I stopped trying to ascend, stopped trying to be spiritual and conscious, and embraced my humanness and decided I'm going to become more material and not less, and more attached. More attached, not non-attachment. The Buddhist non-attachment. Now I will say that teaching is misunderstood. But I'll tell a little story. You're probably familiar with it, but there was this Zen master, and he, had many students and gave great teachings, and he had a son who he loved very much. And one day the son took sick and died, and there was the Zen master at the funeral, crying bitterly. And one of the students came up and said, "But master, haven't you taught us that this is all an illusion? Why are you crying so bitterly?" And he said, "Yes, it's all an illusion, and this is the saddest illusion of all." We're here to love, and we're here to be attached, and then we're here to lose. And we're here to cry about it and to live life fully because it's short. We're here for this experience. There's nothing wrong with separation. There's nothing wrong with descending into matter, into these special, beautiful vibrations that we have denigrated by calling them low. This is a beautiful realm, and I'm really glad to be here. And if we don't fully embrace it, then we end up destroying it and making something ugly of it, and then coming back again and again until we get it right, until we treat it as the gift that it is. It's a gift. The whole world is a gift. And when we treat it as something low or dirty or bad, we're throwing the gift right back in the face of the giver. We're dishonoring the gift. And it's time to stop doing that.
So, thank you for sharing some very beautiful insights. It's not a judgment, it's a feeling.
Yeah, judgments are okay, yeah.
But I call it staying connected, with the vibration of everything. And when I planted my first pine trees, they were so much smaller than the telephone pole. And I would sit there and say, one day you'll be big, and after almost 40 years, they're huge.
Mm-hmm.
They make the telephone pole look insignificant, And when I always cut a branch, I use it for a tomato plant or something, because everything is important. It's a gift that we have. And the scientists like to describe we're in stages. Like man 1, if we get to man 1, everything will be free and knowledge will be free. We'll have that appreciation. Man 2 will go out of the universe, and then 3 we'll be able to discover how to go through wormholes and bend time and things of that nature. As man on the planet here, where do you see the potential, and what do you see the grow up or blow up scenario happening?
The goal of our blow-up scenario?
Yeah, grow up or blow up scenario.
Oh, grow up or blow up. Well, I think that what's happening today is that we're going through a coming-of-age ordeal, where we've been as a species, we've been in adolescence, and in childhood and adolescence, in which during that time it's normal to grow and to take from the mother, and traditionally, as you reached full growth as an adolescent, then you would be subjected to an ordeal. that would take apart your identity, basically. I mean, it would be intense. You know, you'd have to go out, they'd tie you to a tree for 3 days, or send you out to have a vision quest, and don't come back until you've had a real vision, and we'll know if you're lying. And if you are, you're not welcome back. Like, you know, something, or they'd give you psychedelic plants, you know, something like that would just, you know, blow away your identity, and then you would then reconstruct it and reincorporate it into a bigger identity that included more of creation. And so that's what humanity is going through now. The crises are basically, they're making the world fall apart for people. The world, it's the end of the world as we know it. You know, all of the things that people knew for sure for a long time are coming under question. And for a while, people cling on, you know, and they hope things are going to go back to normal again, and then they get bewildered. They don't understand what's happening, you know. I mean, this is exactly what an adolescent goes through in a tribal initiation. And so we're getting initiated into adulthood. And in adulthood, we no longer have the relationship of just taking and taking from Earth. We enter into a new kind of relationship, which is mutual. We give, you know, just like you desire to give to your little sweetheart, you know, on Valentine's Day when you're 15. You know, you desire to give, yeah, here, you know, and like, so we desire to give back to Earth now in a big way. And then the next desire is to co-create with Earth. So I think that if you want to get in tune with the times, then really it's just time to give to the Earth and to give to the collective being of humanity and to each other, you know, and that's what the future of money is too, the future of economics, which is I'm writing a book called Sacred Economics about the transformation of the money system and why it's breaking down and what's going to follow. And sometimes people ask, you know, so I spoke to a group of investors one time. It was a weird thing. I don't know how they found me, but there I was. And there was a speaker about, you know, this is falling apart, that's falling apart, you better invest in gold, you know, it's the only safe haven, et cetera, et cetera. And then so when I got up to speak, someone asked me, they said, well, what do you think about gold? You know, because these were wealthy people, not ultra wealthy, but wealthy people who wanted to keep their nest eggs safe, you know, and how do we have a safe retirement? You know, what's safe? What's secure? And I said, well, gold isn't secure. Because if things break down to that point, then men with guns will come and take your gold. Like, that would be like the most dangerous thing to have, would be like, you know, a room full of gold when there's social chaos. So what is the safest thing? The safest thing would be to have a community of people who remember your generosity, who have depended on you, who know you, who love you. Really, the best security would be to give to your community. In fact, you can't even have community without gifts. Community is built, woven from gifts. But that's not only is this like, you know, some nice spiritual thing, you know, and you're going to be a good person if you give, you know, but it's actually very much in your self-interest to be a community person and to give as much as possible and not to accumulate things which will be taken away by men with guns anyway in a few years when we go through a short but pretty intense dark time. But who knows? That's just my guess.
You don't think that can be averted?
I don't think that transformation happens without hitting bottom, you know? So no, I don't think it can be averted. But I don't think it's going to be as bad as people think, because of this transformation of consciousness is so underway, and people, you know, I mean, we've developed so many potent technologies of, you know, social technologies, nonviolent communication, you know, and I mean, all the stuff that people are working on, and energy healing, and all of these things. Like, the people who are in the doom and gloom mode, they don't recognize the power of these technologies of reunion, technologies based on the connected self. So the dark time will be, I think, less traumatic, and it will be shorter than most people think.
If we act on the positive side.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a different issue. I'm always careful about we, though, because that feeds despair. We. If we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to stop polluting the environment, we have to, all that to the right politicians, we have to, because you're not we,
Right, right.
So really, the question is,
How do you become an example?
the question really comes down to, do your individual choices have cosmic significance? And you know the answer to that. You can feel it. Yeah. I'm way past time. Okay.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Yeah.